So here we are in After Effects. And when you open up After Effects for the first time, this is likely what you will be seeing. There's a bunch of panels, different options, different stuff. And if you want to get a better idea of the possibilities in After Effects just in general, you can check out Adobe. Got a lot of stuff here that you can see. Really love After Effects. I've been working in it for years. There's so many different things you could do, whether you're working with video or animating elements. Very, very cool. But you also go to a website like this and you can find yourself maybe getting a little overwhelmed. So we're not going to worry about the big wide world of After Effects. This is not what the course is about. I'm just going to give a little bit of an orientation so we can find our way around in the program and show you some helpful stuff for you to start playing with your Procreate art. So the After Effects equivalent of your canvas in Procreate is this composition. So if you click on this new composition button here, it'll give you this window with settings, 1920 by 1080. That's probably what we're looking for. I will change the frame rate here to 24 because that's usually the number that I have in mind when I am working with cell animation. So this corresponds to the frame rate in your timeline in Procreate. If you change the frame rate in settings, it doesn't have to match this, but for simplicity's sake, let's say that big poof smoke animation that I'm about to bring in here, I believe we checked and it was at 12 frames per second. So 24 might be the default if you are really accounting for all those individual frames. Let's go ahead and just set this at 12 for now and hit OK. And so now we have this composition. When you import different artwork, you can put it in here. We will have a timeline that you can scrub here by clicking and dragging. But right now, just got a big empty space. So let's get our artwork in here. Now I will go up to File, Import, and then click File. And now I'm going to navigate to where I saved that PSD from Procreate. So here it is. It's PSD now. And if I double click on that, we'll get this option. I wouldn't worry about this too much right now, but when I import stuff, I like to have it set to composition, retain layer sizes, and hit OK. And now you'll see when you did that, it brings this in as its own composition. So I'll double click this now up here in my project panel. And here it is. So what you'll notice when you're bringing in your animations from Procreate is that the animation does not seamlessly translate. What happens when you export that animation as a PSD is that all your individual frames of animation get stacked on top of each other. And it also produces an individual background image. So Procreate by default has that background layer built in, and it will create this as its own layer. You usually don't want this when you're importing animated elements to incorporate into something else. So I can go ahead and select that and hit delete to get rid of that. And now you'll see there's a black space here, but that's actually transparent space. So I can put a different background back there if I want to. I can do a lot of different stuff with that. And if you come down into, you're in this composition window here, and if you come down to these settings down at the bottom, you can ignore most of these for the most part right now. But this little checkerboard right here is the toggle transparency grid. So if you click that, you can then see what is transparent in your image. So what we want now is, well, we have a timeline. We're just not seeing any animation right now because all of these layers are on simultaneously for the entire length of the space. And we want this to actually just play back at our 12 frames per second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select every layer in here by, you can click down here at the bottom or here at the top, hold down your shift key, and click down here, and then we'll copy. We'll come over here, go to edit, paste. Now we have all of our layers in here. And now if we hit Command or Control K on our keyboard, this will bring up those composition settings that we saw earlier when we were creating this. And again, look, frame rate is 12. So if I want this to play back identically to how it was playing in my Procreate timeline, I want each of these individual frames to be on screen for one frame in this timeline. I'll hit OK. And if you scrub through this timeline, you can see how it's snapping like that. That's each an individual frame. And let me show you, if we hit Command or Control K to bring up those settings again, you can adjust the duration of your entire composition. So if I rendered this out as a video, like an MP4, it's gonna be 4 seconds long, plus a little bit extra. So maybe I want this to be 10 seconds. I could change that to 10 and hit OK. And then by grabbing this little slider and zooming it down, now I can see everything. And now you can get a better idea of how this works. Wherever you are in the timeline and there is no layer filling that space, you're going to get blank space. So just an alpha, just a transparency. There's no artwork here. And what we're going to do is we're going to trim each of these individual layers to be exactly 1 frame long and then sequence them out on the timeline. I'm going to show you this manually, but I do use a third-party script to help me automate some of this process just to make it a little bit faster. But for now, I'll show you what I mean. So I'll grab, actually this top layer, let's just delete this one because I think it's just empty. And if you are curious what any layer looks like on its own, so this is obviously kind of messy to look at, if you click on it in your composition window and you click this little ball here, check that box, it'll solo that layer. So I could see there's nothing on here. I left a blank layer on the timeline in Procreate so I could see how the animation fades off completely. So I'll just delete that. And now you can see if I solo this layer that's on top now, there's just a little bit. This is just the last frame of the animation before it goes off screen. Or if I jump to the middle, layer 28, and solo that, now I can just only see this and nothing else. So what we can do is for each individual layer, you can grab it here on the end as it's selected and drag it to change the amount of time that it's up on screen. So if I wanted to fill up the whole space, I could drag it all the way to fill up the timeline. So what I want to do is come down to the end and I want to trim every layer to be exactly 1 frame long. So it needs to fill only this space. And if I do this, I can select all of them and drag it down. And that is 1 frame. Now, of course, if you play it back, and you can do that by hitting this play button up in the preview panel or hitting spacebar, will RAM preview your comp. Now it's there for a split second and then it goes away. So that's not what we want. What we want is to stagger these frames out linearly. And we'll just do that by clicking and dragging and putting each one end to end. Now, if this seems tedious, you're absolutely right. And again, I do use a script that unfortunately is not native to After Effects to take care of this for me. And I will go ahead and show you that. So here we go. And now what I'm gonna do is trim this composition down for playback. So I will come down to here in my timeline and I'll hit the N key. And what that does is it'll trim the preview area so that when I play this back, it'll just start over. It won't run down the total, all the 10 seconds that I added here. And so now I'll go bring my playhead back to the beginning of the comp and hit spacebar. And there we go. Now it's animating. Looking pretty cool. So I want to show you, if I just kind of back up, I'll revert all of this back to how it was, roughly. I want to talk a little bit more about that frame rate thing, because as I was talking about the 24 frames per second being sort of traditional animation playback frame rate, let's change that from 12 back to 24. And now if I want to replicate that same look, it basically just means that if I trimmed each of this down to 1 frame again, it would go by much quicker. Let's see what that looks like. 1 frame. Drag these out. Okay, let's play this back. You see how fast it's going now? And that's because each layer of animation, 1 frame, and at 24 frames per second as the frame rate for the composition, it's playing each frame at about twice the speed as it was before. So if we go ahead and Control or Command K, change the frame rate back to 12, we're going to get that original speed that we had before. This is the one that we desired. So what is cool about this, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of things, I have set the frame rate back to 24. And I'll hit Command or Control A when I have this window selected to highlight all the layers. And I'll click and drag to make each one another frame long. So now each layer is 2 frames on the timeline instead of 1. Play it back. And now, so this is a 24 frame per second animation, but it feels the same way as it did before, because in a 24 frame per second comp, and you have these animations playing 2 frames at a time, it's going to give you that same timing. And why it can be cool to animate at 12 frames per second is because then you can sort of fine tune things and have some frames of your animation only play back once. So maybe different sections go by quicker. Now, I don't know if you'll really be able to get a sense of that in this playback here. But that's something that you really only worry about once you're starting to really get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. But just keep in mind how big of an impact the frame rate can have on your animation. And it's also something important to plan for. You kind of want to animate things in the same project that you want the same look and feel. You want to probably animate those at the same frame rate. So a couple different things I want to show you now. We could add a background to this. I'm going to toggle the transparency grid again with this button here, so I can see what this looks like. And you know what? Before we add a background, the first thing I'm noticing really is that once I dropped it into this new composition, well, it's not centered. It would be nice if it was in the center of our comp. And you would think, oh, I'm just going to grab this and move it. But now you can see that that only actually moved 1 frame, which is not what you want. And if you want all of this to be centered, you'd want to be highlighting all of them and drag, and it should work. Now, I animated this originally in Procreate so that it was roughly at the center of the canvas. So it's roughly in the center here of its own, of the layers that make it up. And if I grab this and I move it around, you can see I've got that this little crosshair here. And what that is an anchor point. And every layer in After Effects will have that. And it's sort of like the control center of a layer. So if I click on this and I want to rotate this layer to the left or to the right, it's going to pivot around this point. And I'll show you how to do that. How you can animate or control any property of any layer in After Effects is by clicking the layer. Let's go down here to the start, click on this layer, and click on this little arrow here in the comp window. And you'll get to transform, click that down. And now you can see here are the parameters that you can animate in After Effects. And these little stopwatch icons are how you will set keyframes in After Effects, much similar to the keyframes we talked about in the last lesson. And that is how you control animating these properties. So I mentioned rotation. I have this layer selected. I'll click on this rotation and drag, click and drag to the left or the right, and it will turn. And you can see that it's pivoting around that anchor point, the little crosshairs there. So if I decided, well, I want to rotate this from somewhere else, like from the bottom of the word, you can use the pan behind tool, which is up here at the top. You've got some basic navigation controls here in After Effects. And it's right here, the pan behind anchor point tool, or you can hit Y on your keyboard to bring that up. And then if I click on the anchor point of the layer I have selected, I can move that anywhere I want. So if I moved it here, and now I rotate it, it's going to rotate around there. So if I want this to be roughly in the center of my composition, I can move all of them. Well, let me undo really quickly to get that anchor point back in the center, just so we're all consistent. So I'm going to hit, I always mess that one up. If you hit the quotation and apostrophe key on your keyboard, it will bring up this grid that you can help you sort of see exactly where the center is of your composition. It has its own little crosshair here for you to be able to see that. And then I'll select all of this, all of my layers, and just take a look at it. And I can drag all of them to be sort of visually right in the center, right where I want. Perfect. Okay, so how about adding a background? I don't have anything painted or sort of pre-prepared for this, but maybe I just want to have like a color fill for the background. And you know what? I also think I want to make this square so I can post it directly to Instagram right on my feed and it'll look nice. So what I'll do first to make it square is, you guessed it, Command or Control K to open up our comp settings again. And what I usually do when I'm making a social media post like that is change the width to 1080. And now we have 1080 by 1080. Click OK. And now the comp is a square. And you can see that the animation is kind of going off the edge, which can be fine. But in this case, maybe I don't want that. So I'll show you how to resize all of this as well. But first, let's drop in a colorful background. And there are a couple ways to do this. First, you can use a shape layer in After Effects. Now, shape layers can do so many different things in After Effects, so we're going to keep it really basic here. But if I click and hold on this, you can get some different shapes if you want. I just want a square, the rectangle, which is the default. So if I just double click on this, it will automatically fill with a square shape, or to be more precise, this rectangle shape will automatically fit the size of your comp. So if this was still 1920 by 1080 and I double clicked on that shape, it would make a 1920 by 1080 square. And it'll default to whatever last color you were using. So if I want to use this as the background, I'll pick this, select it, drag it to the bottom, and now it's underneath everything. So another thing to keep in mind is that in After Effects, just like Procreate or Photoshop or any similar program, higher up on the stack of layers means that its visibility kind of takes priority. So the higher you are, you'll cover up the elements below you. So if you want a background layer, you should put it at the bottom here. Or instead of using a shape layer, and I will delete this, you can use a solid. I'm not going to get into the differences, different use cases of shape layers and solids here. That's more of an After Effects course thing. But a solid is basically just what it sounds like. I can throw down a nice solid color that fits the size of your comp. And I use it a lot for background layers. So how I will make a solid is I will go up to Layer. Oop, got to have your composition window selected. Then I'll go up to Layer, New. Go to Solid. And you'll get up this window. You can do the same thing. You can change the height and width. It will default to your comp size. You can always click this Make Comp Size button that will make it default to the actual size that you're working with. And I will click and drag this down to the bottom. Now I have this dark gray solid. Now to change the color of a solid, you need to open up the solid settings, which you can access by having the solid selected, click layer and go to solid settings. And then this is what you can use to pick the color. You can see you're automatically getting that feedback. Make it this glaring red. Now this is a great opportunity to show you an effect that I use all the time in After Effects with my Procreate stuff, which is when I want to recolor something. And that is the fill effect. So I have my solid selected, it's red. It feels a little clunky to have to be opening up the settings all the time to get into this color picker. So maybe I want to be able to change this a lot quicker. And we'll do that with the fill effect. So to get your effects, you're gonna be looking for this Effects and Presets window. Now, if any of these panels are not visible right away, you can find any of them by going up into Window and finding the one that you're looking for. So Effects and Presets is right here. If that's not checked on, you could just click it. It'll show up. It'll open right up for you. You can also access any of the effects here up in the top toolbar. If you click Effect, and you will need to, again, make sure you have, your layer in your comp window selected, and go to Effect, and you can find a lot of these. But if you know the name of the effect, I find it easy to just come over here and type it in. So for Effects and Presets, I will type in Fill. And this is the one that I'm looking for here at the bottom, Generate Fill. So if this is selected, I can double click on that. Or you can always drag it and drop it onto the layer. So now I have two instances, so I'll delete that. And the fill defaults to this bright red too, but now I can just change this and it will override that red color that came up when I generated the solid. And now anytime I want to change that background color, I can just click on my solid layer again and come up here and change it here. So any effect that you apply to a layer is going to show up in this Effect Controls panel. And that is where you will go to access it. You won't be able to see it generally unless you have that layer selected. So I can only change the color of this background solid if I have that background solid selected. Then its Effect Controls panel will populate any effects I have on it. So great, we have this fill. Now, this is a perfectly pleasant color, but now maybe I want to fit that big animation so that it's not running off the edge of the screen anywhere. I want it to fit where it goes. So what I kind of want to do, so I can resize this easily because I like where it's at, maybe I just want to be able to scale all these layers up or down without having to worry about grabbing them, opening up the scale by hitting S on the keyboard and dragging the scale. It's a little clunky, doesn't feel good to me. If you want to have a little bit more greater control over the placement, you can pre-comp your layers. And what that means is that you will have a composition inside your composition. And it's almost like a layer system. It's a way that you can group items together so they can be treated functionally the same. And it can be really useful for instances such as this. And to do that, what I'm going to do is highlight all my layers. And I only want these now. So that's why I'm going to click and hold down Shift and then click again to highlight all of these, because if I just do the Command or Control A, I'm going to get my solid layer too, and I don't want that. I want this red solid to stay in this main comp. And I'm actually going to change the name of this to main comp up in my project panel. So you can rename any of these by clicking and pressing Enter, or right-clicking and going down to rename. And you can see down here in my general kind of timeline window, now it's main comp. Now I'm going to click layer 19, hold Shift, click layer 46 at the top, and go to layer, and go down to pre-compose. Or you can also use the Control-Shift-C or Command-Shift-C shortcut. Now you'll want to make a new composition name, and again, organization, it's huge. I'll always be wild about that. So I would name this something like main comp underscore big animation. Just something so that I know clearly what it is without having to dig. Obviously this is a pretty simple file, but things can get pretty hairy. And I'll show you the Stir Fries Dream project file just so you can see what that whole final project came together as in After Effects. I'll hit OK. And now we have this one element on the timeline. And it cuts off here, you can see, because that is where the layers end inside. So now what we can do, and you can see we have this new comp up in our project panel now. So if I double click it either in my timeline in this window or up here in the project panel, you can go into this comp, it's square, open up the comp settings, 24 frames per second. Here's the name, hit OK. It's got transparent background. And if I hit spacebar, it'll play back. And here we have this, very cool. So now if I go back to my main comp, well, I can resize this. So I'll look at a frame where it's kind of getting cut off, and I will select this, twirl down my transform parameters, grab my scale. Whoa. And you'll notice when you do something like this, well, wait a minute, like now it's still being cut off. So I have it smaller, but it's still cut off. If you open this again, it's getting cut off because this needs to be a bigger composition. And because it is square, it's cutting off the animation. So you can see when I select the layers, this is actually how big the layer itself is. And so we need to make it a little bit wider. So again, we'll open up our comp settings and let's change that width back to 1920. Okay. And now it's not getting cut off in here. So what does it look like if we go back into our main comp? It's looking good. So you can see this is where it's actually ending now, the composition. You can see the borders of it. And it is staying in the frame. There's a little bit of it trailing off. I don't mind that. It's looking pretty good. So one more thing I want to show you is how to change the color of an animation itself. So you might think, well, okay, I'll put a fill on it. So let's do that. I have this here. I actually still have fill pulled down in my effects and presets. I'll click, drag it onto this pre-comp. But, well, first of all, that is very hard to look at. So we'll change that. But this is not what I want because now I'm losing that black outline. And that was a stylistic choice on my part of this animation. So that's not really ideal. Okay, so what's a different way I can do this? Well, I'll delete this fill. And if you have an animation with a black outline, and as you were putting it together in Procreate, you couldn't quite decide what color you wanted it to be, default to filling it in with white, because using the tint effect in After Effects, you can get control over that white color. So let's go here. Instead of fill, I will type in tint, and you'll want this color correction, tint, drag it on here. And now there's no change because it defaults black to black and white. And so I can change this map white to color by clicking on that color box. Now I can change this and the black outline will stay the same. And what's actually pretty cool about this is not only that, but I can also change the black outline to be a different color if I would like to. So this is just something that if you have a simple two-toned animation or piece of art in Procreate that you want to recolor a bunch of different ways quickly, the tint effect is the way to go. Another effect that you can add really simply is just a drop shadow, which if you have played around with any digital art before, you might know what a drop shadow looks like, but let's go ahead and add it to this by type in drop shadow. We'll get our effect here, click it, drag it onto my comp. And now you can see it's already been added. And just like any other effect, I have it up here in my effect controls. I have all of the stuff that I can play with, so I can drag out the distance for how long and how far away I want the shadow to be. I can make it soft if I want, but I like this hard shadow to kind of keep with the cartoony look. It looks kind of nice. And I can make it all fully opaque by dragging the opacity up to 100%. I can also use this direction swivel, clicking and dragging to change the direction, like sort of the lighting that would be casting this shadow. That's something you can just throw on pretty easily. And it works because, again, this animation is on a transparent background. So if we had, for example, put the background layer inside of this comp, I'm just going to make a solid really quickly, drag that to the bottom. If we go back to the main comp, now you can see the drop shadows there, but it's on the bottom because it is on this solid layer. It's no longer affecting all of the little bits and pieces, which we do not want. So I will delete that out of there. So that is just a super simple way to get up and running in here. Let's look at some other cool stuff that you can do with your Procreate animation in After Effects.